So, have aliens actually visited Earth in our distant past? It's a question that sounds like it was ripped straight out of a sci fi movie. But the real story of this idea, how it went from the pages of a scientific journal to a primetime TV sensation, well, that's a story that's probably more surprising than you think. Let's dig in. Okay, listen to this quote. "It is not out of the question that artifacts of these visits still exist." That is a pretty bold statement, right? It suggests we could literally find physical proof of ancient alien contact. So, who do you think said that? Some late night radio host? Maybe an internet conspiracy theorist? The answer is probably not who you're thinking. Nope, this wasn't some fringe theorist. It was one of the most respected astronomers of the entire 20th century, a true pioneer in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And that, right there, is where our story really begins. You see, long before it became a TV show with dramatic music, the whole ancient astronaut idea started out as a serious, if, speculative, scientific question. Back in 1963, the one and only Carl Sagan published this fascinating paper. Now, he wasn't saying aliens built the pyramids or anything like that. Instead, he approached it like a giant cosmic math problem. He crunched the numbers and basically said, hey, given how old the galaxy is, it's statistically plausible that Earth could have been visited many, many times. He even suggested that the best place to find an artifact, like an old probe or something, wouldn't be on Earth, but hidden away, perfectly preserved on the far side of the moon. So Sagan cracked open this really fascinating speculative door. But it took another guy to come along and just kick that door right off its hinges, taking the idea from a thought experiment to a global phenomenon. And that man was Erich von Däniken. His 1968 bestseller, Chariots of the Gods, wasn't really interested in things like statistical probabilities. No, it made a much bigger, much more direct claim that the gods our ancestors worshipped weren't divine at all. They were flesh and blood extraterrestrial visitors. So how do you even make an argument like that? Well, the core method of what's now called paleopsyche is all about reinterpretation. You take this strange mythical language from ancient texts and just swap it out with the language of modern tech. So a fiery dragon descending from the sky? That's not a myth, that's a spaceship landing. Angels delivering messages to prophets? Nope, those are just aliens sharing advanced knowledge. See how it works? And to build their case, proponents hunt for what they call out-of-place artifacts, or OARTs, objects that just seem way too advanced for their time. They love to challenge the mainstream story, often framing their arguments as though they're just asking questions. And to give it all a sheen of legitimacy, von Däniken and others even founded organizations like the AAS to conduct their own style of research. Now, for decades, this theory was kind of bubbling under the surface in books and magazines. But then, in the 21st century, it found the perfect medium to launch it into the pop culture's stratosphere. And that medium, of course, was television. Everything changed with the premiere of Ancient Aliens on the History Channel in 2009. The show took all those core ideas from von Däniken and beamed them into millions of living rooms, week after week, posing that big, tantalizing question: what if? The show's impact was immediate, and it was huge. By 2010, you couldn't go anywhere online without seeing that iconic pose from Giorgio Tsoukalos. You know the one I'm talking about. It became one of the biggest memes on the planet. And today, the ancient astronaut theory, it's not some fringe idea anymore. It's a fixture in mainstream conversations. But how exactly does the show make its case so compellingly? Well, critics, like those at Smithsonian Magazine, point to a very specific debate tactic called the Gish Gallop. The idea is simple. You just bury your opponent, or in this case, the viewer, in a rapid-fire avalanche of questions, anomalies, and speculative ideas. It happens so fast that it's impossible to fact-check it all, which creates this powerful illusion of overwhelming evidence. And this really gets us to the core of the whole thing, doesn't it? It's this fundamental clash between two very, very different ways of thinking about the world: the scientific approach versus the pseudoscientific one. So let's just lay it out. On one side, you have the scientific approach, the Carl Sagan way. It always starts with a question. Is this possible? It uses tools we can test, like statistics. It absolutely demands physical, verifiable proof. And, this is the big one, it's okay with not knowing. Science is totally comfortable with uncertainty, and its conclusions are always open to change if new evidence pops up. The paleo-SETI approach, on the other hand, well, it often works backwards. It tends to start with the conclusion, aliens definitely visited Earth, and then it goes out hunting for bits and pieces of data that fit that story. Ambiguous myths or strange artifacts aren't seen as puzzles to solve, they're presented as proof. And the rhetoric is clever, right? It jumps back and forth between just asking questions and stating those interpretations as solid fact, all while defending this one core narrative. This quote from Eric von Daniken himself really gets to the heart of that philosophy. The reason of today cannot accept the reason of the past. What he's saying is that we, with our modern logic, just can't comprehend how ancient people thought, leaving this big, mysterious gap that can only be filled with an extraordinary explanation, like aliens. So, after all that, why does this idea stick around? I mean, despite all the skepticism from the scientific community, why are so many of us still so completely captivated by the thought of ancient astronauts? Well, because ultimately, this was never really just about ancient history. It's about us, right now. The ancient astronaut theory taps into some of our deepest, most human needs. That desire for our existence to have some kind of grander meaning, to feel like we're part of a huge cosmic story. And maybe most of all, that profound hope that in this unbelievably vast, quiet universe, we are not alone. I mean, think about the famous face on Mars. For years, people were mesmerized by what really looked like an artificial structure, maybe a message left for us. And even after we got better pictures and saw it was just a natural landform, that fascination didn't just disappear. Because when we're searching for traces of another intelligence out there, maybe what we're really searching for is just a reflection of ourselves. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Is this whole quest really about archaeology, about trying to decode a lost chapter of our past? Or is it actually more about psychology, about us taking all our modern hopes for connection and maybe our fears too, and just projecting them onto the silent monuments of history? That's a question worth thinking about.